Hello and welcome to the Chiaroscuro Jazz Podcasts. I'm George Graham, Director of Artistry and Repertoire for the Venerable Jazz label, celebrating our 50th anniversary and featuring over 100 titles by some of the world's great jazz musicians. This time we feature Polish pianist Adam Makowicz, who recorded his first American trio album for Chiaroscuro in 1981, A Handful of Stars, which was co-produced by the great veteran producer John Hammond, along with Chiaroscuro founder Hank O'Neill. Born in 1941, Adam Makowicz studied classical music at the Chopin Conservatory of Music in Krakow, Poland. But despite the cultural restrictions of the communist government in Poland, Makowicz developed a passion for jazz, listening to the Voice of America on the radio. He began attracting attention in his home country and, at the behest of John Hammond, came to the U.S. in 1977 for a tour and eventually settled in New York. In the 1980s, he was banned by the Polish communist regime for his support of the Solidarity movement. In the U.S. and Canada, he has had a long and productive recording career. Later, we'll hear him talk about his experience, but first, let's listen to Adam Makowicz on his Handful of Stars album, with an all-star trio with George Mraz on bass and Jack DeJohnette on drums, starting with an original piece called Satin Wood. Adam Makowicz with Somebody Loves Me, and before that an original piece called Satin Wood with George Mraz on bass and Jack DeJohnette on drums, recorded in 1981. One of the distinctive features of many Chiaroscuro CD releases is the Jazz Speak track, in which the artists talk about their music and experience in their own words. Here's Adam Makowicz.
Hello, I am Adam Makowicz. I was born on the Czech side of Polish-Czechoslovakian border during German occupation of Europe of Polish parents, who after the Second World War returned to Poland. My mother, a singer and a pianist, was my first teacher. Later, my parents arranged for piano lessons with Professor Szafranek, who was a well-known piano teacher in Rybnik, a city where we lived. Later, I studied classical music in Katowice and Kraków, where I attended Chopin's School of Music and a conservatory, which I did not finish because of my involvement in jazz. In mid-50s, I discovered a jazz program, Music USA Jazz Hour, beamed every night on shortwaves by the Voice of America, broadcasted and produced by Willis Conover. What I had heard on these programs changed my life forever. I had to choose between a new love for freedom of improvisation offered by jazz, then considered by authorities a decadent music, and a career of a classical pianist, which my parents and music teachers envisioned for me. I had chosen jazz. Because I was not allowed to play jazz, I had to leave my home and school in order to do so. It took me 2 years of hand-to-mouth homeless living before I found a small jazz club hidden in a cellar where I could play and sleep in exchange for doing chores. Together with other jazz fanatics, I was glued to radio every night and listened to Willis Conover's program, trying to remember what we had heard. Tape recorders, albums, or sheet music were not available. There were no jazz teachers either. Jazz Hour was in the beginning our only source of American jazz and jazz musicians. In early 60s, after a quartet I created with a friend trumpeter, won competition for jazz combos, my professional career began. I attended many annual jazz festivals in Europe, and I play extensively solo, trio, and with American great geniuses like Art Farmer, Benny Golson, and some other great horn players. Another person who played a very significant role in my life was John Hammond. In 1977, he invited me to New York, and during my 3 months staying here, he practically launched my career on this side of Atlantic from level 0 to the top. He gave me public exposure by arranging my debut with the 6 weeks contract of Barney Josephson's Cookery, then a famous and prestigious jazz club in Greenwich Village. It was later extended to 10 weeks. He arranged my performance of the Carnegie Hall along with Errol Father-Hines, George Shearing and Teddy Wilson during Newport Jazz Festival. This was a concert dedicated to Errol Garner, one of my idols and masters, who died 6 months earlier. Imagine playing for the first time in my life with these giants of jazz and in such most famous place. I was scared to death and nervous, but I could not disappoint John, and I got a standing ovation from over 2,000 people. He produced my first American recording called Adam on CBS Columbia label, which gained an accolade of rave reviews when released next year. In April 1978, I returned to New York with my wife and 2 suitcases, this time for a 6 months contract which was later extended, then replaced by another one until the end of 1981. That year held very significant events for me, musically and otherwise. On July 10th, 1981, John Hammond recorded my first trio American album with such great musicians as George Mraz on bass and Jack DeJohnette on drums.
Adam Makowicz. Now here's more music from Handful of Stars with an original ballad called Past Tense, followed by a great version of the old standard Bye Bye Blues. pianist Adam Makowicz with Bye Bye Blues, and before that an original piece called Past Tense with George Mraz on bass and Jack DeJohnette on drums. Now here's more from Adam Makowicz's Jazz Speak.
Then in December 13th of 1981, the Polish regime imposed a martial law in Poland to crash the Solidarity movement. The United States and the whole world supported Solidarity. Former President Ronald Reagan initiated a special event called Let Poland Be Poland, in which many world-renowned artists and public figures took part in solidarity for the Solidarity movement. I was proud to be a part of that concert transmitted over TV and radio all over the world in support of effort to gain freedom for Poland. As a result, I was banned from Poland forever, as it seemed then, and what amounted to 9 years, that is, until-Poland gained its independence in 1989. I became an American citizen in 1986, and in April 1998 we will celebrate our 20th anniversary of living in New York. During these 20 years I performed solo, with groups and with symphony orchestras in the US, Europe, Canada, Mexico and Peru. I shared the stage at the Carnegie Hall and other prestigious places with many great musicians, played in jazz clubs, music schools and churches, received grants from National Endowment for Arts twice, experienced many ups and downs of my career, and learned early on that the only steady thing in life of a jazz musician are taxes.
Let's hear Adam Makowicz now from his Handful of Stars album with the title track. pianist Adam Makowicz with Handful of Stars from his Chiaroscuro album of the same name, featuring George Mraz on bass and Jack DeJohnette on drums, recorded in 1981. Since then, Adam Makowicz has recorded numerous albums for various labels. His catalog includes some 30 recordings, but Handful of Stars was his debut American trio recording. You can find Handful of Stars and many other Chiaroscuro releases on our website at chiaroscurojazz.org, where you can also find a searchable database of artists and the music on the label. The music is available on CD, as a download, and streaming on Spotify. And you can also listen to continuous jazz from the over 100 albums available on Chiaroscuro 24 hours a day on the Chiaroscuro channel, available at the new and improved Chiaroscuro Jazz website. This is George Graham. Thanks for listening to this Chiaroscuro podcast, and join us next time for more music from great jazz artists.